Today I want to do a little bit of a preliminary intro for the 3 books of occult philosophy by Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. I plan on doing a series fairly soon, and this is kind of a episode 0, you could say, of that, but this is also to explain for practical occultists what you can get out of it and what you would actually be learning if you were to fully read the 3 books of occult philosophy. So, I am Dave the Amateur Magus. On this channel I talk all about the mechanics behind ceremonial magic, occultism, esotericism, and the mechanics behind everything you can find within a dusty old grimoire. If you enjoy what I do here and want to support the channel, link in the description of the Patreon, where you can get exclusive access to videos early, Patreon exclusive content, and the Occultic Manual series, which is a monthly write-up that I aim at being more instructional than what I have here on the channel, but less unapproachable than some of the old grimoires I like to talk about on the channel. If any of that sounds of interest to you, link in the description, as always. And thank you for everyone who is already supporting me on Patreon. You have my thanks for your continued and ongoing support to keep the channel running. So, the 3 books of occult philosophy were written by Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa and originally printed in a complete edition in 1533. There were various different manuscripts, and his understanding of the occult and the occult sciences, as he would call them, came into a final manuscript around 1533 AD, though there are earlier manuscripts and we do have evidence of that. They are a full 3 books on magic and occultism, from the perspective of the day. More on that in a bit. Agrippa was a Hermetic Catholic Christian who studied under the abbot Johannes Trithemius. Now, if that name sounds familiar, he is an abbot who wrote many occult works, one of which being the method of drawing spirits into crystals, which is so small and so useful that it is often recommended today for people who want to learn about basic evocation of angels. Agrippa was a contemporary of Paracelsus, and as such, things invented later on, or by Paracelsus, will not be included in the 3 books of occult philosophy. You will notice, if you read the 3 books of occult philosophy, there is no mention of elemental spirits properly. There is no reference to the undines, the salamanders, and the sylphs, at least none that I have seen in my multiple readings. Now, the 3 books of occult philosophy is broken down into 3 parts. The first book is the natural world, the second book is the celestial world, and the third is the divine world. Book 1 covers the basics of, at the time, contemporary occultism, as well as the basis of elemental magic and occult virtue theory. Now, as somebody who runs a channel where I talk about magic from a mechanical perspective and talk about it in the practical sense, I would like to point out that you will not find any practical instructions on how to do rituals involving the elements in Agrippa. Agrippa seems to think you are physically going to be working the elements of fire, water, earth, and air, as if you were performing IRL alchemy, which is basically just fancy chemistry at this stage in the modern world. However, from a practical perspective, we can take what Agrippa is saying about the elements and use them as for our elemental magic. For example, the element of air in Agrippa is said to be the element of divination and dreams and divination. And he says that because it's kind of weird. Intuition is usually considered the watery aspect. And when we go through and we look at what each of the correspondences is, we will find that Agrippa attributes the element of air to having divination properties, which is very interesting because when we look at it, because in the modern world at least, we don't usually like to think of the element of air as the divination element. Usually that attributed more to the element of water, but the element of water is more intuition and scrying than it is actual divination, but the element of air is the actual element that is carrying the spiritual virtues to our deck and whatever system that we are using. This is why tarot cards, if you get a standard-sized tarot deck, are so big, because there is literally more surface area for the divine energies to actually filter into your deck. Agrippa also mentions occult virtues. Now, occult virtues are basically going to be, they're not correspondences, they are qualities a thing can possess. And these are going to be natural, or they're going to be individual specific. For example, some dogs are going to be very courageous, some are going to be cowardly. Some cats are going to be very personable and very social, some are going to be total loners. This is one of the more relatable versions of this explanation, so that you can understand what's going on here with occult virtues. Now, what Agrippa says in this is that he is applying occult virtues. We apply occult virtues from one thing to another. And in particular, we're usually doing this with planetary virtues. We are taking a lot of planetary things, and we are suffusing a particular virtue of the sun into an object. Now, he says the sun, you can use all of them, so you could theoretically use very Saturnian things and get a very Saturnian correspondent infusion of virtues. Now, this is effectively a very naturalistic method of enchantment. This is, and in fact, some systems actually have this. You would take a bunch of various relating things and you would tie them together in a bag, and said bag would then proceed to have the virtues that you are trying to get for yourself. Now, a good example of this in the modern era, and you can take what he says with take some inspiration from what he says, is making elemental oils, or just oils in general. You can take the various different herbs and incenses, and then you can suffuse them with the element of your choosing, so that you have a oil that is absolutely jam-packed to the brim with whatever particular elemental energy you are looking for. So in the case of, let's say I wanted to make solar oil, I would ideally want to take several ingredients, have some kind of carrier oil. Luckily, there is a sunflower oil, so we can use sunflower as an ingredient in and of itself. We can put various different solar things in it, such as cinnamon, frankincense, sunstone if you wanted to use like a rock or a stone, and you could throw 3 more in there that I'm drawing a blank on, but you could do that, and then you could use those as a basic recipe for a solar-infused oil. Now, Agrippa also mentions that individual plants and animals have their own unique correspondences that will be less pronounced, but still the case. This is the basis for astrological charts, and this is the basis for astrology affecting your particular makeup. In Book 1, Agrippa also gives planetary attributions, foundational magical techniques, a basic introduction to divination, which he mentions some very interesting things, including omens and divination by birds, something that I completely forget every time that I go through it, because who the fuck is divining with birds in the modern era? With the back sections of the book more or less being associated with the mind, how it connects to the divine, writing, and speech. Basically, if you are familiar at all with the Hermetic system, you would know that Hermetics place a great deal of importance on thought, reasoning, logic, and specifically speech and words, as well as going through and writing things down. Writing and speech is particularly of note for Hermetic occultists, and these sections are very important for that. Now, that's just Book 1. That is just Book 1. Now, as you can probably tell, just doing a very brief summary of 2 sections in Agrippa is very, very long. Now, I get a lot of complaints about particularly Book 1 from people who do not actually want to engage with material. And to those people, I'm going to say, actually think about what he is saying and figure out how you can apply it. The reason I say that is because Agrippa has notes about things that are factually just disproven science. We know that science has disproven a lot of Agrippa's scientific basis. For example, Agrippa has an entire section on medieval optic theory that explains how, your eyes are actually projecting the light out, and the reason that they believed this was actually not by looking at human eyes, but by looking at cats. And that was how that worked, and that's also, I believe, part of the reason why. I believe they had an entire theory about how it worked. and then they realize that your eyes reflect light in, and it was a whole thing later on. But for the time being, they believed in medieval optic theory. Agrippa believes in medieval optic theory because that was the up-to-date science of the time. Is it actually true? No, it is not. Is it important to understand where he's coming from? Yes, because if you just take all of what Agrippa says and say, oh, well, Agrippa was just using bunk science and he was, we know that, like, stupid medieval person, that's not how science works. God, thinking magnets just have this invisible pole and they just pull iron for no reason. That's just a thing that they do. We know about magnetic fields. Question, can you see a magnetic field with your naked eye? Can you, specifically? For a vast majority of people, the answer should be no. And if the answer is yes, congrats on the bionic eyes. Congrats. That's pretty sick, honestly. But for the majority of us with normal biological eyes, that is not a case. That is not the case. You are not going to be able to see magnetic fields. Now, you're going to be able to interact with magnetic fields, but that's like saying, oh yeah, I know the wind is there because I can feel the wind. Well, if you're in the middle of a grassland looking up, do you know if it's windy? No. We know about certain things by how they interact on the world, and this is how we need to treat Agrippa's works. Agrippa knew different things. He wasn't always right, but his theories are generally sound, especially for occultism, because despite the fact that we are of the opinion that, most of what Agrippa said was wrong, for the most part, a lot of what Agrippa says is pretty accurate. For example, Agrippa talks about how the elements make up everything, right? The elements make up everything, and if you change the elemental properties of something, it will change what its essence is. Well, for those of you who have done the Kabbalah, Magick, and the Great Work of Self-Transformation book that I recommend as a self-initiation, you will know that the main steps in that book involves completely elementally unbalancing yourself in the direction of a particular element in order to rebuild yourself. And you have probably noticed that when you are working with a particular element, you're going to change. Your life circumstances change. Your entire work ethic changes if you're in the elemental grade of Earth, at least. But you're going to be going through and you're going to have radical different shifts in how you operate as a person. Now, you're still going to have your baseline tendencies, but even those are going to be minimized and maybe altered as you go through the elemental grades. And this is what Agrippa is talking about here. Agrippa says that if you change the elemental nature or the elemental makeup of something, it will change behaviors. We know from initiation systems that this is true. So are we going to just say, oh yeah, if I eat more salt? That's not what Agrippa is talking about from a fundamental perspective. There's a concept called arguing in good faith. A good faith argument is it is an honest, respectful approach to a discussion where two people are genuinely trying to understand and be understood by each other, even if they disagree or they don't fully understand at the beginning. You don't go into a massive book immediately thinking you know better or of everything that this author is going to say is bullshit just because you read one thing and then you're going to be like, oh yeah, no, throw the baby out with the bathwater is tainted, it's got a little bit of something I don't recognize, when that thing might be soap, right? So now you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater because of soap, right? It's not a good look, not a good argument, and it's not a good way of conducting yourself. And this is what I find a lot of people do with Agrippa, because the people who read Agrippa after having a solid magical practice read Agrippa and get pissed. Not because Agrippa is bad, not because Agrippa is wrong, but because they have had enough experience to know that what Agrippa is talking about would have saved them a lot of time. I have had this happen 6 different times, with 6 different people. Which is to say, I love pissing my friends off by making them read Agrippa for stuff that they really already know, but it's put in a way that they realize that there is a lot of their understanding that is missing, because they have just enough to actually learn more than when they started. I love pissing off my friends by making them read Agrippa. It is my favorite thing to do. That being said, this has been kind of an intro. There will be more videos covering the different sections of Agrippa. I'm working on them. They take a long time. Hope everyone is having a good day. If not having a good day, hope your day gets better. Take it easy, take care, and I will hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.